Well, President Trump is expected to hold a high-stakes telephone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin later this morning, aimed at pausing the war with Ukraine.
The White House says it is hoping to convince Putin to accept a 30-day ceasefire proposal, which Kyiv accepted last week. That led the U.S. to lift its restrictions on military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Speaking from Air Force One over the weekend, President Trump laid out some potential talking points with his Russian counterpart.
I think we'll be talking about land. It's a lot of land. It's a lot different than it was before the war, as you know. And we'll be talking about land. We'll be talking about power plants. That's up, it's a big question. But I think we have a lot of it already discussed very much by both sides.
You'll ask him.
Ukraine and Russia.
You'll ask him.
We're already talking about that, dividing up certain assets.
Joining us now on This is NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez and our chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel. He's in eastern Ukraine. Good morning to both of you. Thanks for being here, Gabe. I will start with you and just tell us what's expected to be on the table during this phone call between Trump and Putin.
Hi there, Savannah. Good morning. Well, the Kremlin is saying that this phone call will take place between 9 and 11 a.m. Eastern time. And as you alluded to, so much is at stake here. What the president said over the weekend is significant, where he's talking about dividing up land. That is something several years ago that would have been unthinkable that Ukraine would have accepted such a deal. But it has really come into focus over the last several days. The Trump administration's overseas envoy Steve Witkoff met with Vladimir Putin late last week to try and hammer out a draft agreement. Now, the White House National Security Council says that no commitments have been made, and there are a lot of questions about what land the president is talking about. However, today is 11 years to the day that Russia illegally annexed Crimea. So there are a lot of questions. Will the president perhaps recognize Crimea as officially part of Russia, something the U.S. has not done so far? Also, the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine that has been so disputed since this war began. But certainly a lot of questions about how President Trump, he will agree to, and what Putin will agree to in this call that we're expecting later on this morning. Unclear when we'll get a readout of that call, Savannah and Joe.
Richard, let's bring you in here. You have been covering Putin for a very long time. What is the likelihood President Putin will even accept this ceasefire deal? I mean, what is Moscow hoping to get out of this call?
Well, I think we've moved very far beyond the ceasefire deal. The goalposts have been extended. As you laid it out, this initially started as a discussion about a 30-day ceasefire that, under duress, under pressure, Ukraine accepted unilaterally. President Zelensky said he's on board with it, that he would stop fighting, he would stop all military activity at land, in the air, at sea, if Russia agreed to do the same. The idea was that this 30-day window would allow the two sides to talk. That's exactly how Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, described it. A 30-day pause, stop the killing. President Trump described it in the same way, so that you could have more opportunities to work on these longer-term discussions, the borders, security arrangements. Now President Trump says that is mostly agreed on. He says that this conversation is about territory. It's about dividing up certain assets. It's about land. It's about power plants. So I don't think it has anything really to do anymore with this 30-day window. That might be part of a larger agreement, but we're talking now about Presidents Trump and Putin effectively dividing up Ukraine, and many Ukrainians feel they are powerless to watch this. And we were just talking to a soldier not long ago, and he's very worried about territorial concessions. Ukrainian troops have been fighting, getting injured, in some cases giving up their lives to hold the front line. And today they could see President Trump and Putin effectively say that the war is over, that the territory that Russia holds, or even more, goes to Russia, and the Ukrainians will be forced to either accept or reject that.
Gabe, the president has long claimed that he would be able to secure this truce between Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, there's a huge question at what cost, as Richard just pointed out, when it comes to divvying up land and issues of those types of matters. But how much of a test ultimately will this phone call be just of the president's ability to make a deal like this, and how confident is he sounding at this point?
Well, critics of the administration say that President Trump is being led along by Vladimir Putin, who has no intention of making this agreement. But the Trump administration is arguing, as it has now for several weeks, that we are further along in these talks than we were during the Biden administration, and that President Trump has gotten people to the table. However, as Richard pointed out, if the Ukrainians feel powerless in this, someone else that feels powerless is many of our European allies who are looking at this and wondering what other concessions President Trump may give, perhaps easing up on Russian oil sanctions. So a lot of questions about how this moves forward and whether President Trump ends up giving up more to Vladimir Putin than we were expecting. But again, the Trump administration is arguing that their main goal is to stop the killing.
So, Richard, I mean, you mentioned how powerless Ukrainians feel right now. Do we have a feeling of just how skeptical President Zelensky is about this call and about what's taking shape right now?
President Zelensky has said repeatedly that President Putin is looking for a way to extend the war. Ukrainians believe that what is happening now is effectively a bait and switch. They were talking about a 30-day ceasefire, and now suddenly they're talking about an end of conflict kind of agreement that President Trump could present to the world as a fait accompli. And President Zelensky has been warning, don't fall for this. We need to hold the line. He's worried that President Trump will sign what used to be called a separate peace with Ukraine, leaving Europe struggling to respond. So there is a concern in Ukraine that this is not how the peace process was supposed to go. President Zelensky thought he would be in a much stronger position than he is right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.